The icy wind whipped across the empty parking lot as Daniel Parker, a tired single dad and small-town mechanic, knelt beside a stalled sedan that had pulled in just minutes before closing. His grease-stained hands trembled from exhaustion, and his breath came out in visible clouds, but what made his heart pound wasn't the cold, it was the sight of a woman standing beside the car, clearly shaken, clearly desperate, and clearly out of options. Her hazard lights blinked urgently, like tiny alarms in the dark, and something inside Daniel whispered that this was one of those moments where kindness mattered more than convenience. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she looked like she'd been crying, but he did know one thing: he could not turn her away. And so he pushed himself up, wiped his hands on his jeans, and offered help without hesitation. That simple act, fixing her car for free, would set into motion a chain of events that would change the course of his life forever. What he didn't know yet was that the woman whose engine he was repairing would look him in the eye before leaving and say words that would nearly stop his heart: "I'm the judge for your case tomorrow." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories where one moment of compassion can change someone's entire life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whispers of Kindness. Your support keeps these real-life inspired stories alive. Daniel's life had never been simple. Since the day his ex-wife left, overwhelmed by the challenges of raising a child with medical needs, Daniel had carried the world on his shoulders. Every morning began before sunrise, packing lunches, checking his daughter Lily's medication schedule, and whispering encouragements to her to make her smile before school. Then came the long hours at the garage, where he worked not out of passion, but out of necessity. He had learned to adapt, to swallow fear, to juggle bills, to sacrifice sleep, and to pretend he wasn't breaking under the weight of responsibilities that never seemed to lighten. Yet through it all, he held on to a simple belief: if he gave kindness, maybe someday life would give some back. But life, for a very long time, gave nothing in return. That changed the night the woman's car sputtered to a stop in front of his garage. Her name, he later overheard on a badge she tried to tuck away, was Eleanor Hart. She carried herself with a kind of quiet dignity, but her trembling hands betrayed the weight she was carrying. Daniel noticed the way she hugged her coat around herself, the slight limp in her step, and the exhaustion in her eyes, an exhaustion he recognized all too well, the exhaustion of someone who had been strong for too long. When he lifted the hood and saw the damage, a snapped belt, leaking coolant, and a battery on its last breath, he knew the repair would cost more than she probably had. He also knew, without understanding why, that he could not charge her a single dollar. So he worked through the freezing wind, through aching fingers and numbing feet, through the pain in his back from lifting Lily that morning, and with each turn of the wrench, he felt an odd sense of purpose. This wasn't just a repair. It felt like a debt to the universe he didn't know he owed. When he finally finished, well past closing, he simply handed her the keys, offering a weary smile. Her reaction was something he didn't expect: not relief, not gratitude, but a strange flicker of heartbreak. She whispered something barely audible, a soft thank you that carried a tremble, and then, gathering what seemed like courage, she told him the truth. She was a judge, and he was due in her courtroom the very next morning. Daniel's stomach dropped. His upcoming hearing wasn't a simple parking ticket or minor dispute. It was the case that could decide whether he kept custody of Lily. His ex-wife, after years away, had suddenly reappeared wanting full rights. Daniel wasn't angry. He was terrified. Terrified that the woman he loved more than life itself, the little girl whose laughter sustained him, could be taken away. He had prepared every document, gathered every medical report, attended every evaluation, but still, he feared the system might see him as unfit simply because he was poor, overworked, and sometimes overwhelmed. And now the judge who held the power to determine his family's fate had just experienced his most vulnerable truth: he was a man who helped because he could, even when he had nothing to give. That night, Daniel barely slept. Every sound Lily made in her sleep felt like a reminder of how fragile their world was. He sat beside her bed long after midnight, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, memorizing it as though he feared it might disappear. Her tiny hand rested outside the blanket, and he wrapped his pinky around hers, needing the connection more than she did. In his quiet, dim room, surrounded by bills stacked on the table and repair tools he hadn't put away, he prayed, not for victory, but for fairness. For understanding, for someone to see the father he was, not the circumstances he struggled in. Morning arrived heavy and tense. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paperwork, and Daniel's hands shook as he held Lily's file to his chest. His ex-wife sat on the opposite side, looking collected, confident, and ready to win. When Judge Eleanor Hart walked in, Daniel felt the air shift. Her presence was calm, but her eyes carried a storm of thoughts he feared he had influenced simply by helping her. He worried she might think he was trying to sway her. He worried she might overcorrect and be harsher. He worried about everything until his head ached. But Eleanor did not look at him with pity or favoritism. She looked at him with understanding deeper than he could have imagined. As the case unfolded, every detail of Daniel's life was laid bare: his income, his schedule, his struggles, and the nights he worked late because he needed to pay for Lily's treatment. He felt stripped, exposed, vulnerable. Yet Eleanor listened with a softness in her eyes, as if she saw not failure, but sacrifice. She asked questions, not to challenge him, but to understand how he carried so much with so little support. And when the opposing attorney tried to paint Daniel as unstable, Eleanor's gaze turned sharp, almost protective. Something in her demeanor made Daniel feel, for the first time in years, that someone believed in him. Hours passed like days, and then, after reviewing documents, testimonies, and Daniel's trembling explanation of why Lily was his entire world, Eleanor paused for a long, heavy moment. The courtroom was silent. Even Daniel's heartbeat seemed to stop. She spoke with steady clarity, delivering a verdict that made Daniel's knees buckle. She ruled in his favor. Lily stayed with him, but it wasn't simply what she said, it was why she said it. Because she saw a father who didn't give up. A father who sacrificed everything. A father who helped others even when he needed help himself. A father who deserved the chance to raise his child without fear. When the hearing adjourned, Daniel stepped outside into the cold air, unable to hold back the tears he had fought so long to contain. They came silently, like a release of years of pain, fear, and exhaustion. He expected Eleanor to walk past him, distant and professional, but instead she approached slowly, carrying an expression that held both gratitude and something unspoken. She revealed, in a quiet, trembling voice, that the night before, when her car broke down, she had been rushing from the hospital where her brother had taken his final breath. She had been too numb to think, too devastated to call for help, too lost to feel anything but despair, and Daniel, without knowing her, without asking anything in return, had shown her the first kindness she had received in weeks. She told him that his act of compassion didn't influence her judgment, it reminded her of what justice was supposed to protect: people like him, people who did right even when life did them wrong. Her words carved themselves into Daniel's heart. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a struggling mechanic, not as a man who barely scraped by, but as a father who fought and loved fiercely. Lily tugged at his sleeve, unaware of how close she had come to losing everything, and Daniel lifted her into his arms, holding her with a mix of relief and overwhelming gratitude. As he turned to thank Eleanor, she simply nodded, as if to say that some debts of the heart needed no repayment. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly steadied. Daniel found a renewed purpose in his work, fixing cars with the same generosity he had offered Eleanor. The townspeople began noticing his kindness, and word spread until the once struggling garage saw more customers than ever. Not because he was the cheapest, but because he had become a symbol of integrity. Lily's health stabilized, and Daniel would often watch her play with new energy, feeling a gratitude so deep it hurt. He never forgot that a single act of kindness had rippled back into his life in ways he had never expected. Near the end of the year, as the first snow began to fall, Daniel received a letter. It was from Judge Eleanor Hart. She wrote not as a judge, but as a person whose life his kindness had touched. She thanked him again for helping her when she was at her lowest, told him that his strength as a father inspired her to heal her own wounds, and expressed that his compassion had reminded her why she pursued justice in the first place. At the bottom of the letter, she had written something simple yet profound, words Daniel would carry with him forever: sometimes the universe repays kindness in ways no courtroom ever could. If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness matters, and if you want more real-life inspired stories like this, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whispers of Kindness. Your engagement helps these life-changing stories reach more people. Special request: before this video ends, comment below one small act of kindness you believe can change someone's day.